Welcome to the Irresistible You podcast. This is the place to get a dose of empowerment to create the life you crave and deserve. I'm your host, Amy Beltran, CEO and founder of Irresistible University. Through my podcast and courses, I teach women just like you how to ditch the body image issues, gain confidence, and lose the emotional weight to look and feel irresistible at any size. Welcome to episode 197. I cannot believe we are just a few episodes away from the 200th mark, so amazing. Today, guys, what I want to talk to you about is, well, first and foremost, I am recording this on the day it's being published because this is just a topic that's really important to me, and I think that there's a big connection that loops back to the foundation of what it means to live an irresistible life, to go after the life you crave, to use your voice, to go after your hopes and dreams. I think that there's a big connection here. So November 14th is called World Diabetes Day, okay? And World Diabetes Day was established it was established by the International Diabetes Foundation and the World Health Organization back in 2006. And the reason they selected November 14th, it is the birthday of Sir Frederick Banting, or Dr. Banting, who co-discovered insulin along with Charles Best in 1922. Okay, that's really important. And the pursuit and the discovery of insulin is something that has completely changed the world. It has completely changed and touched so many lives, including mine and my family's. And I'm going to give you a little bit of some history on some of these things so that you understand. And then I want to loop all of this back into living an irresistible life and not being silenced and not sitting on your hands and being scared to speak up and being scared to go after things and being scared to be wrong and being scared to fail. Because if Dr. Banting did those things and doubted himself, and when you're a scientist and a doctor and you're doing experiments, you're going to get things wrong, right? So then you go back to the drawing board and you say, okay, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? How can we fix this and do it differently the next time? And I think that's such an important lesson to take with you as we talk about something that's very important, but also to know, maybe you're not sitting on, the patent for the next drug to cure a terminal illness, but maybe you're sitting on something that somebody else needs, whether it's a message, whether it is a helping hand, whether it is, inspiration, motivation that someone else can see through you. You can't hold your gifts back from the world because you have fear. And because you have fear that you don't want to be seen, that you don't want to be heard because you're the quote unquote fat girl and you're afraid to show up as yourself and take up space in this planet, in this world. I want you to understand that what you have, the gifts that you have, the voice that you have, the message that someone else needs from you, you can't hold on to that. You've got to put it out into the world because you never know how that's going to change somebody that woke up today and in the trajectory of their life. Seriously. So we're going to loop back to that towards the end of the episode. But I first want to I'm going to give y'all a little bit of a history lesson just so that you understand, the discovery of insulin, why it's important. It's very near and dear to my heart. So first and foremost, I have a daughter who lives with type 1 diabetes. Okay. She is now 7 years old. She was diagnosed at 4. And diabetes has obviously become a very large part of our lives. It's part of our story. It's just part of us. It doesn't run the nest. It doesn't run the household. It doesn't run our activities, but it's always, in the background. It's a constant. It doesn't go away. You don't get to a point where, you take enough insulin or you manage it a certain way and things just level out. It doesn't work that way. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to educate the differences between type 1 and type 2 and understand that on World Diabetes Day, this is for all types of diabetics. It's not just for type 1. So the reason I want to call this out is there's a lot of ignorance, a lot of people that just don't understand, because you hear about type 2 all the time. And there's a lot of disgusting jokes that people use. Oh, if you keep eating cake, I'm going to have diabetes after I eat this. And people say really like ignorant things like that. And everybody believes that you get diabetes because you ate cake or you ate too much sugar. That's not the case. Okay. Is that the case? Sometimes in type 2, it can be brought on by certain lifestyle choices, but not always. So let's just understand the difference, right? Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. It is autoimmune, meaning your body attacked itself. Your body attacked the cells inside your body. So when you have type 1 diabetes, your pancreas stops producing insulin. And insulin is a hormone that your body needs in order to get energy from food, right? So if you don't produce insulin, right, the glucose that you consume through your food, we convert glucose to energy, and that glucose needs to get into your cells so that it can convert to energy. If you're not producing insulin, your cells lock up and they can't accept the glucose. So what does that glucose do? That glucose or sugar, it sits in the bloodstream and it builds up in the bloodstream. And untreated, meaning not treated with, the only treatment for type 1 diabetes is insulin, period. That's the sentence. When that happens, the blood turns acidic and someone will go into what's known as diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. DKA can be deadly. If someone is living with type 1 diabetes and they're not being treated with insulin, I'm going to be very blunt in the way that I say this, they will die. There's no other way around it. Insulin is just as vital as oxygen to your body. It's something we take for granted. When we're not living with type 1 diabetes and we don't have to think about it, we take it for granted, just like any other, or just again, like going back to body image and appreciating your body, because you've spent so many years hating your body, talking shit to your body, beating yourself up with the inner fat bitch dialogue, that you don't stop to think and be grateful for like as I'm sitting here right now and the functions that are just automatically happening to keep me speaking and sitting here and alive. We don't take the time to think about that sometimes. And when you don't have to live with something like this, especially like I never thought about this before, this like blindsided me 2 years ago. So take the time today to be grateful. Even if you look in the mirror and you don't like the fat rolls, okay, and you don't like the cellulite, and you don't like the loose skin, and you don't like the double chin, or whatever it is that you're picking apart in the mirror. Even though you may not like the package inside is working, okay? And it's doing what it needs to do, and it has gotten you through everything that you've been through so far, that you are now today in 2023 or beyond listening to this podcast, okay? So type 1 diabetes is autoimmune, okay? So your pancreas stops working and no longer produces insulin. 100 years ago, okay, so let me just explain. So 100 years ago, that's really not, if you think about the time, right, and in humanity, 100 years ago was 1923. 1923. Some of our grandparents, that's when they were born. Like they were born in the 20s. This wasn't that long ago. So 100 years ago, if someone had type 1 diabetes, it was a literal death sentence. It was a terminal illness. And the only, I'm going to use air quotes, treatment was a starvation diet. So, and in essence, all they were really doing was prolonging a very painful death of starvation and DKA. So they would put, and a lot of times, so anyone can develop type 1 diabetes. It can actually onset at any age. However, the majority of people that are living with type 1, that onset happened in their childhood or in their young youth, like early 20s, okay? But it's still, I heard from someone the other day who just developed type 1 in her 40s. So it happens, okay? So in the 1920s and beyond, or before, they would starve the children because it was mostly children. And there are these jarring images that you can Google Dr. Banting, discovery of insulin, and you can see this. But there's these jarring images of children in a ward inside of a hospital, and they look like actual skeletons. They look like living skeletons. Like you can see every bone protruding from their body. Because in order to, give them a little bit extra life, they would starve them on less than 500 calories a day, low carb. And essentially, again, all that did was prolong a painful death, because even on a starvation diet, you might get a few more months, maybe a year or two, but that would be very rare. It wouldn't be anything past maybe a year or two. And that's being generous. So that was 100 years ago. The discovery of insulin happened in 1921. In 1921 is when it was discovered. However, prior to 1921, for years, there's even like ancient Greek and Egyptian history about, it's actually where the term, the scientific term from diabetes mellitus, that's where it comes from, which actually means honey, sweet, urine. So I don't know who was back in the pyramids, somehow discovered somebody's urine had sugar in it, but I'm just going to say a thank you and put it out there to whomever took that chance, okay? Because my point being, the research didn't just happen in 1921 and that was where it came from. It's been in the makings, all of humanity, as people have been trying to figure out what this thing is. So 100 years ago, this was a death sentence. And there's not here I go. I promise myself I really don't want to cry in this episode, but I can't talk about some of these things without getting choked up. There's not a day that goes by that in my prayers, in my meditations, I don't have gratitude and a thank you for the discovery of insulin. Catalina, our daughter, just turned 7, less than a month ago in October. Okay. She was diagnosed at 4. She would have never lived to see her 7th birthday if it wasn't for this drug. If it wasn't for this discovery, if it wasn't for these people who were relentless in their search and their research and their discovery of making this happen, our little girl wouldn't be alive today. And that's not being dramatic. That's the truth. Because type 1 diabetes was a death sentence. And look how far we have come, right? Like, not even just insulin. And when it first happened, they were extracting insulin from pigs and from dogs and from animals. And, now we have synthetic insulin and we have all different long acting, short acting. We have there's a variety of insulin on the market, right? That's just the insulin side of things. Then you have the tech, the glucose monitors, the insulin pump, where my daughter no longer has to get 6 minimum injections a day to survive. Because you have to have insulin every single time food goes in your mouth. You also have to have an ongoing dose of insulin that works in the background. Her pump, she gets it replaced once every 3 days. That's 1 poke every 3 days. And that sustains her. And it has, it's completely tubeless and wireless, and it's amazing, right? So my point being, the inventions, we talk a lot about artificial intelligence and AI, which I love AI. I'm very intrigued by it. I use AI in certain capacities. We're all using it in certain capacities, right? But a robot, artificial intelligence, didn't discover these things. It came from somebody's brain. And I think about that with my own children. And I said it since they were born. Like, I thought, what's locked inside those brains? When this baby came out, each child, when they were born, I thought, what were you given? What's locked inside of your brain that the world needs to know? Because someone has cures. Someone has the answer to things that, doctors and researchers have been pouring their life mission into forever. It may not be in the same, I want to think about that for you too. It may not be the cure to diabetes or the cure to cancer or the cure to some, horrible disease, but you might have something that you were given as a gift that's locked in your brain that's going to change the world in some way. And just be very clear, when we talk about changing the world, it doesn't mean standing on a world stage and talking to millions of people and having an impact on millions and billions of people. If you change one person's life, that has a ripple effect that then changes other people, and it spreads throughout the world. So ask yourself, what's locked inside my brain that the world needs from me? Because you never know what life-changing thing, thought, idea, statement. I think about that sometimes too with my podcast where, if I have a week where the numbers are low and I'm like, well, what's the point of doing this anymore? No one's listening. No, there's people listening, Amy. And even if no one's listening, if 10 people are listening, if one person is listening, you have something that someone needs to hear. And when I get messages from people, I've gotten messages from teenagers. Like, teens are not even my intended audience, but I have teenagers that have listened to my podcast that didn't want to continue living their lives because of their bodies. And they will reach out to me and say, I have hope now. I want to live. I want to live an amazing life, right? And that keeps me going because it's selfish for me to hold on to my gifts. It's selfish for me to hold on to my stories because the only way we evolve and change and grow and develop is with other people and by hearing other stories. When you see yourself or hear yourself in someone else's story, it is so completely validating. It validates your experience. And when you've gone through something that you don't think anyone else understands, like being overweight, being made fun of for your body, having people say nasty things to you about your body, when you hear that from other people, it takes the sting away from it. It takes the shame away from it. And it gives you your voice back. So what is locked inside of your brain that the world needs to know? Okay. So 100 years ago, Catalina would not have ever made it to her 7th birthday. She just wouldn't. And in 2023, or 100 years later, type 1 diabetes, yes, it is a chronic medical condition. It does not go away, but it is 100% manageable. And with proper management, people can live a very long, healthy, fulfilling, normal life. Okay. And that just makes me so grateful and happy to hear that and to know that and to be able to know that even in the last 2.5 years of living with type 1, with a daughter with type 1 and being a caretaker, the advances that I've seen in 2.5 years already, it's mind blowing. So here's what was very interesting to me. In 1920, so backing up a little bit, Dr. Banting, okay, he is preparing for a lecture on the pancreas. And the night that he's preparing for this lecture, this gives me chills, is October 30th, 1920. October 30th is a very important date for now knowing this, but also was already a very important date in my life because October 30th is when my husband and I got married. October 30th, 2010. Okay. So he's writing this lecture. he has this epiphany and he believes he has now stumbled upon this treatment that's going to work for diabetes, right? It has to do with dogs and it has to do with pancreas. So in 1921, Dr. Banting and one of his medical students, Charles Best, they start to isolate insulin from dogs. And they take the insulin away from the dogs, which induces diabetes, right? And then they treat the dogs with the insulin, and the dogs continue to survive until the insulin ran out. I'm a dog mom. Every day I'm grateful for my dog Chewy, and the fact that dogs have a big part of this story, and unfortunately, some of them passed away in the name of science, but the fact that dogs are part of this story, yeah, okay. So they start to discover that we can treat people, if we treat people with insulin, they will survive. So in 1922, the first child, his name was Leonard Thompson. He was 14 years old. He was literally in the hospital dying from diabetes, all skin and bones, like looks like a skeleton. He receives the first shot of insulin because the only way to receive insulin is through injection, even to this day. He receives this injection and he ended up living for another 13 years. He ends up dying later from pneumonia and other diabetic complications, which, in the early days where we didn't have the science, we didn't have the functionality and the management that we do now, that did happen. However, this invention of this little teeny tiny liquid kept him alive for 13 years. And you can Google him, Leonard Thompson. If you look at the before and after pictures of how sick he was, and then he's this healthy child with like meat on his bones, like it's amazing. And so they start giving it to kids. These kids are like waking up from, in the hospitals, they're coming back to life. Here's the other part of this story that is just, So the patent, Dr. Banting sold the patent for insulin for $1 to the University of Toronto in Canada. $1. Why? Because he believed it was not about money. It was about the good of humanity and that this should be available for anyone that needs it. And how the tables have turned on that makes me so angry. And that's a topic for another day too. The insulin industry in 2022 was estimated at $22 billion. There are people that have passed away that had to ration their insulin because they can't afford it or they don't have the ability to buy insulin at all. They just passed some bills in this past year, 2023, 100 years later, where insulin on certain plans and certain companies, certain insulin manufacturers is capped at $35 a month. Kat was diagnosed in 2021. When I tell you there's been months where we have paid hundreds of dollars for her insulin prescription. For the first time this year, I've picked up her pens, her insulin pens, and they are $35. Like, we know that we can take action on things. Corporations can take action on things when they want to take action. This was passed literally the next day. Eli Lilly insulin is all capped at $35. So I digress. That is a whole nother topic for another day. There needs to be accessible insulin for everyone. I don't care. Like, you need insulin as much as you need oxygen, period. Okay. So anyway, so that's kind of like the little backstory, the little history of, where insulin started from, where we are today. And by 1923, so they discover it in 1921, they give the first dose in 1922, and by 1923, insulin is now readily available for the masses. It has a long way to go at this point. Like I was mentioning earlier, people were getting injections with glass, like the vials, like the syringes and the needles were huge. Like, it just blows my mind. And there's a place in Ontario, Canada, that is the house. It's now a national history type of historic place. It's called the Banting House National Historic Site of Canada, and it essentially now is a museum which has been dedicated to Banting's legacy. And I definitely want to visit there. It's on my list to go see. They have an eternal flame that is burning in front of the house. And the story is that when diabetes is cured, when someone finds a cure for type 1 diabetes, they will put the flame out. So it's just, I really just need to go there. I need to visit. I need to pay tribute to this because I don't know Dr. Banting. I don't know how he was as a person, but what I do know is that he was relentless. He created something that absolutely 100% changed the world. I mean, hands down. So much so that in 1923, now remember, he first discovers the insulin in the dogs and all of that in 1921. In 1923, only 2 years later, he receives a Nobel Prize for the discovery of insulin, making him the youngest person and the first Canadian and the youngest person to receive a Nobel Prize. At the age, this like blew my mind, at 32 years old. Why is it like, because if you look at his pictures, everybody back in the day looked like honestly looked like they would be 50 now. I don't know why everybody looked older. I guess because we died earlier. So everybody just looked way older than they were. But this man was only 32 years old. That's amazing to me. So because of his discovery, millions of people worldwide have extended their lifespan, have gone on to live very fulfilling, amazing lives. And this continues to get better and better. Like the types of insulin, the tech, like I was saying earlier, like there's so many different discoveries with this disease that will only continue to get better. And I just think, Catalina's only 7, and in her lifetime, I pray and really am hopeful that in her lifetime, there will be a cure, right? But if there's not a cure, so everybody in the diabetic community says this, we're always hopeful, we're always praying that there's going to be a cure. But in the meantime, we have to live our lives like there's not. So we have to live our lives the best that we can with the tools that we're given, with the technology that we have, with the medications that we have in order to live our best life. And maybe one day, and even if there's not a cure in her lifetime, I can't even comprehend the tech and the things that will change for her even when I'm, gone from this earth. Like, it's amazing. So even some of the insulin pumps that are on the market right now that really haven't fully come out, you no longer have to tell it how many carbs you're eating, right? So like right now I have to put in the number of carbs when she eats so that it knows how much insulin to dose. There's these new pumps that are out, and this is the way pumps are going, is that you say, I'm eating breakfast the same as yesterday. And somehow, or you tell it, I'm eating dinner a little bit more than last night. These pumps can detect how much insulin to give. So that just tells me like artificial pancreas is coming. All these things they're coming. And I'm very hopeful and excited about that. So this might be a little bit different than my normal topic. And I just felt like it's very important to share this. It's a big part of my life. And think about Dr. Banting, and if he would have been afraid, what if he hated himself and he didn't want anyone to know who he was, or he didn't want the world to see him, or he would have been sitting on this thing that has literally changed millions and millions and millions of lives. Millions. Probably billions at this point. If you think about 100 years, like it's absolutely crazy. And again, like I am grateful every single day. And when you look at insulin, okay, I know adults obviously drink, you don't drink it. Adults inject a little bit more, obviously, than a child. But when I look at the amount of insulin that Catalina uses in a week, not a week, 3 days. So when I go to fill up her Omnipod, that's her pump. When I go to put the insulin in her pump that she's not going to wear for 3 days, it is such a small amount. Like, if you were to pour it out, it's like not even a sip of water. Like it's not even the amount of a sip of water. That teeny tiny little bit of liquid is what keeps my child alive. My mind can't even I can't wrap my head around that sometimes. And one of the other messed up things about insulin, so here's the kicker with insulin, okay? you can't survive without it. Okay, so if she doesn't receive insulin, she would die. If she gets too much insulin, she would also die. So that is the mind F of living with type 1 or caretaking someone with type 1, is that this liquid gold, if we don't have it, we die. If we have too much, we die. That's something that's been really hard to grasp. And it gives you respect. Like, I have a great respect for insulin and what it does. And that's why when people say, well, how's she doing? Has she leveled out? No, that's not a thing. Okay. Type 1 diabetics have highs and lows sometimes every day. I know especially us, like, we're still, we're 2 years into it and there's still a lot that we're learning. And with a child, I feel like you deal with a lot more extreme highs and lows just because they're kids, right? Like, you don't always know what they're going to eat because sometimes they eat everything. Sometimes they don't. They have hormones. They're growing. Like, their needs for insulin change all the time. So there is no such thing as leveling out. We're just managing. We're managing it. Okay. She's going to let me just look right now. Like, she's at school right now. And again, the beauty of diabetic technology, right? That our kid is at school and I can pick up my phone or my smartwatch and I can see what her blood sugar is right this minute. And right now it's loading. She's 193 and her arrow is going sideways. So that means I know that she just had snack. So her sugar has gone up a little bit and they just had playground time. So it went up, but then now it's doing what it's supposed to do, and that's coming back down. So that peace of mind as a parent, that I can know where she's at, because before she had a glucose monitor, she wears 2 medical devices on her body. Before she had that put on, we're very new to this at the time, we were instructed to check her blood sugars at 9 p.m. when she's already asleep, midnight, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 a.m., and then every time she eats. Or anytime you think you're not quite sure if she's high or low, you need to check it. So this child was getting, probably 6 finger, because you have to do it on your finger, right? It's a needle. Finger pokes a day, 6 injections a day. So you're talking 10 to 12 needles entering this child's body every single day. I have an episode, if you go back, I don't know the number, but it was my episode where I first shared our diagnosis story. And I mean, it was like a living hell at the time. And I didn't know how life would ever feel normal again. But I will tell you, 2.5 years into this, our life is very normal. Like, nothing changed other than, what's your blood sugar? I need to give you insulin before you eat that. Hey, I need you to go have this juice. Like, obviously diabetes has a huge impact on our life and it's always there and we have to think about it and we have to always, and some days are harder than others. But I just remember thinking, because there was this time right before diagnosis where her and I stayed up late, Javi was already asleep, and we watched Frozen and we ordered pizza and we just had a girls' night and it was so fun. And I remember thinking in the hospital, oh my God, we'll never be able to do these spontaneous things like that. That's not true. It's not true at all. So yeah, we do what the girl is amazing. She's resilient. She's brave. And we do what we've always done. We just have an extra step. We just have some extra precautions. Okay. And some days, I will be clear, they suck. Days where the pump fails and it's beeping and it won't turn off. And, you've got to get to school in 5 minutes. Or the other night she was running high because she had an ear infection, and infection can bring on higher blood sugars. And when you're sick, you have to monitor your ketone levels, which means checking your pee. There's little test strips that you have to check, and she had ketones. Well, ketones means if they keep building up and building up, you go into diabetic ketoacidosis. So she was having moderate ketones. The only way to get rid of ketones is water and insulin. So I upped her insulin, upped her water, and the next time she went to the bathroom, they were gone. Okay. 2 years ago, I would have called, because they have a on-call phone number for her pediatric endocrinology office. I would have been calling after hours, wouldn't have been sure what to do, would have been a little bit panicked, thinking I have to go back in the hospital. And it's like, oh, you got ketones. Okay, drink some more and get some insulin in. Bam. Right? Like, so I don't want to oversimplify it, because there's a lot of things that go into if you're managing type 1 on your own, or you are a parent or a caretaker, I am a full-time pancreas for my child. I am her pancreas. My husband is her pancreas. Like, that is us. So it is not easy, but it is completely manageable. And so one thing that I would like to do is end this episode with a little bit of a PSA, public service announcement, about what to look for, or what are the signs to look for if someone is type 1 diabetic, because I missed it. I'm a very present parent who worries about every little thing, and I completely missed it. It completely blindsided me. Looking back, I see it 100% can see that it was type 1, but I brushed it all off because the things that I was brushing it off to made perfect sense at the time. So we're going to go into that PSA for just a second. But again, let your voice be heard. Let your message get out. Let your ideas marinate and ideate and get out into the world, because someone needs what you were gifted. And every single one of you has a gift. That gift might be a discovery of a medication. That gift might be you make the best, birthday cakes this side of town, and everybody wants that, and it's going to make their birthday amazing and beautiful and happy. Gifts come in all certain ranges. Okay. So on that note, let's go over some of the warning signs, the symptoms as a PSA to wrap this up. So there are so many signs and symptoms that someone can show when they are undiagnosed with type 1. First and foremost, excessive thirst. And I mean excessive thirst. So looking back, this was definitely happening. She was asking and saying she was thirsty every 30 minutes. I mean, and when Kat was diagnosed, she was getting over a flu. So me thinking I'm being a good mom and giving her the vitamins that she needs to get over the sickness, I'm giving her orange juice. My daughter is diabetic, and here I am giving her orange juice, just completely full of sugar, and her blood sugar must just be rising and rocking, right? So I give her that. And then what happens if you're excessively drinking? You're excessively going to the bathroom and urinating. So this kid was running to the bathroom also every 30 minutes. And I remember my dad, because Frank was out of town for work. He had been gone for a couple weeks with a detachment. And my dad was here one afternoon, and we both noticed oh my God, she's going to the bathroom a lot. I'm like, yeah, but she's been sick. So she's finally rehydrating. She's drinking. Again, like I said, looking back, I would rationalize all of these symptoms because type 1 wasn't even in my realm of thinking, right? So then we have excessive thirst, excessive urination. A lot of kids, if they're already potty trained, which she was 4 when this happened, they start wetting the bed again. And you're like, and then you're just like, oh, daddy's out of town. We're kind of regressing a little bit. She's nervous. She had just started preschool 2 months prior to this happening. So, we're still transitioning into that. So bedwetting, frequent urination, frequent thirst, and also unexplained weight loss. So children are growing. They're not supposed to be losing weight. And when I say weight loss, I mean pretty extreme. And I remember I had sent a picture to Frank while he's out of town of the kids and everything. And he was like, wow, she looks really skinny. And me being a body image podcaster, I'm like, that, let's not talk about her body and all that. And he's like, no, she looks really skinny. Something doesn't it kind of floored him. And I think I wasn't noticing it because I'm with her. And he's not seeing her every day because he's out of town. And he noticed like, wow. And I'm like, I know. I was like, but she just got taller. Like she's having a growth spurt. So I think she got taller and she's just kind of shooting up. Right. And when I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, like I can really, really see it. And let me talk about weight for a second. That weight loss was the red flag that probably saved her life. So she had been sick for a few weeks on and off, you know, that typical cold and flu and junk going around, you know, and I had taken her to urgent care. I go back 2 weeks later because now she's complaining about her ear hurting. She's got an ear infection. So I take her, and Javi's only 7 months old, mind you, when this is happening. I take both of them back to the pediatrician, and the doctor at the time, the pediatrician said, well, since your last visit 2 weeks ago, I think it was probably like 2 weeks ago, the urgent care, your daughter's lost 3 pounds. She goes, that's not normal for a 4-year-old. She said, that's a red flag. And I think we need to test her glucose. And that's the moment when the world stopped for me. And you know how like everything gets quiet but loud at the same time and you feel like you're going to faint? That's kind of where I was at that second, going, what the hell are you talking about? Like my daughter's not diabetic. You're going to check her glucose. And I just thought, whatever. And she checks her glucose in the office. The meter stops at 600. Normal blood sugar range is 80 to like 120, 150 at the most. This kid was over 600. She said, Mom, I'm going to need you to stay calm. This is not going to be easy. You're going to have to be really strong for her because there's going to be some hard stuff that happens in the next couple days. And I need you to get to the emergency room now. And that is how we found out she had type 1. And she said, and she also at the time also checked her urine. Her glucose in the urine was off the charts also. But that doctor, which she called me when we got out of the hospital the following week, and I told her, I was like, you were an angel that and this was a late in the day appointment, guys, like late, like one of the last appointments in the day. So many doctors would have just looked over that little detail, that little but large detail, right? And she didn't. And I believe that saved her life because it was a Friday. We were going into the weekend. I believe that if we would have got sent home with our medication for the antibiotic for the ear infection, got home, Catalino definitely would have gone into DKA. She was right at the border of being diabetic ketoacidosis, right at the border of having diabetic ketoacidosis. Luckily, fortunately, she was not into DKA, so that was just, I'm very grateful for that. But I really believe if she wouldn't have caught it by Saturday or Sunday, she definitely would have gone into DKA. Maybe she could, and when DKA happens, you can fall into a coma and you can also pass away. Like it's very real and it's very scary. I don't tell you these things to scare you. I tell you these things to prepare you. And that's a phrase in diabetes that I've adopted: prepare, not scare. Because if you know the symptoms, if you know what to look for, you can rule it out. Okay? And I hope that you never have to go through this, but it happens. Okay? And it's a lottery. There's no rhyme or reason to it sometimes. So we have the excessive thirst, frequent urination, unexplained weight loss, exhaustion. The kid was tired. Another thing that's not always on the list when you like Google, but one of the other symptoms was her behavior. Oh my God. Like her attitude and her behavior was erratic. She's not that type of child. She's a very calm, we all have our moments, but she's a very calm, level-headed, like easygoing type of kid. And her behavior was hideous. Like I would pick her up from preschool, and she was in preschool and she was staying in the after kids club, aftercare. So I'd pick her up around like 3:00 or so, and she was nasty, like yelling, demanding, just getting angry. And as soon as she got in the car, she wanted something to drink. And if I did, like, she wanted it now. And I'm like, oh my God, this baby was her body was eating itself. Like literally her body was like eating itself and destroying itself. And I'm getting pissed because she has an attitude, like, but I didn't know. And, I thought, she started preschool, Frank's out of town, we're having some behavior things. It's, whatever. So some other things that you can notice are like fruity smelling breath. I don't remember this. I don't ever remember that. And the fruity breath smell is from all the glucose, all this, like the glucose that's in the body. Nausea, stomach pains, rapid breathing. I know a lot of parents I've talked to, their kids had labored breathing. Confusion, definitely. I could see that with her as well, like kind of tied into the behavior stuff, and drowsiness, exhaustion. So the reason these things are happening, the body is screaming inside. The body is your body is literally attacking itself, right? And so the body's attacking the insulin producing cells, and it's doing the best that it can. But these are the symptoms. Know the symptoms, okay? If you or someone you love and you're noticing this or you're experiencing this, just go get your blood sugar tested. That's the way that you're going to find out, is to test your blood sugar. I don't understand why pediatric offices, when the kids go in to do their well visits, right? They get weighed, they get measured, they get blood pressure, they get injections sometimes. I don't understand why well visits are not inclusive of blood sugar checks. It just should be part of the appointment. Anyway, that would prevent a lot of this. And I have heard absolute horror stories about doctors brushing it off or not catching it, or sending someone home when a parent thought it might be this. And they're like, no, it's just a flu. Go home. So sickness can, a lot of times, type 1 diabetes, like if you were born with it and it's laying dormant, so to speak, an illness can trigger it to begin. So that's what happened for us and for Kat, is she was sick. The sickness brought this on, and there's no reversing it. Here we are. We just have to manage it from here on out. So know the signs, know the symptoms, talk to your doctor, ask questions. If you have a hunch, if you have any inkling of something wrong, you need to act on that. All right, so that was my PSA. We're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up for World Diabetes Day. What can you do for World Diabetes Day if you are not diabetic or you are not managing the care of someone who is diabetic? You can educate yourself. You can, look up some accounts on Instagram, follow people, do a little bit of research, learn about it. Listening to this podcast kind of checks the box too, like just creating a little bit of space to understand. And also back to what we were talking about and looping all this back to Irresistible You is, again, don't sit on your gifts. Share your gifts with the world. The world needs whatever it is that you have. Okay? Whatever it is that you have to put it out there. You cannot let fear ruin that opportunity for other people and for yourself. Okay. I think we're going to end on that note. I love you guys. Thank you for listening. I just want to say, if you would like to support the podcast, the best way for you to do that is to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It is free. It is easy to do. And you can catch up with me on Instagram. I am at Irresistible Icing. That is the social media account where I am the most active. I try to post every day in stories. I'm not sure what we're going to do with the Facebook group. The Facebook group has gone dormant. I haven't been managing it. So if you've requested access, I apologize. I have not been going in there and accepting people, not because you've done anything wrong, just because as the year is ending and I'm thinking about the plans for the podcast and beyond, I'm not sure what to do with the Facebook group. So let me know. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. Do you want a Facebook group? Would you like us to build that back up? Would you like that to be a private discussion? That was always the goal, right? Is to have a place where when the podcast is over, there's a place to have private discussions about the episodes or about topics related to Irresistible You. So I need to make a decision. I want to hear from you guys what you think about that. But in the meantime, catch me at Irresistible Icing over on Instagram. And I thank you so much for listening. If you've made it this far, thank you, thank you, thank you. I will catch you in the next one. Until then, stay irresistible. Bye, guys.